Over another low kick variation. So we're going to do a basic shin drop, okay? So this is sort of the fastest version of the low kick because we're not winding up and we're not using a lot of hip turn, okay? We're basically trying to drop the shin straight down onto the opponent's thigh, okay? So if we're squaring up here, if we're looking at the angle, most people will square up with the thigh on an angle this way, so it's pointing into the ground. Now the angle of that may vary depending on the depth of the stance, and what we're trying to do is set up the shin so that as we strike, we're striking at as much of a 90-degree angle as possible, okay? As much of a perpendicular angle as possible. We're not getting so much of the power in the kick through the snap of extending the knee. We're basically just using this sort of movement at the hip, a flexion and then internal rotation of the hip to drop the shin down onto the thigh, okay? So the hips are basically square, right? We may have a little bit of a hip rotation around as we kick, but it's basically square on here and then rotating the hip around and trying to drop and trying to have that sort of roll over of the hip and the shin right as we approach the target, okay? So square on here and then rotating in and landing the kick down, okay? So just practice that slowly and softly because this is, it can be quite a painful technique, right? And we're trying to really hit with the blade of the shin, right? So we want to take it slowly. All we're doing is just trying to set up the angle of the kick with our partner, okay?
Thanks for watching, guys. If you haven't already, please check out my book, The Science of Striking, a complete guide to strength and conditioning for combat sports.
A few points with this. Not only are we attempting to hit the thigh, but we almost want to imagine that we're using the pressure of the shin on the thigh to drive the whole leg down into the ground, okay? So if I'm just kicking regular get-on moshigeri, I feel the impact of the leg or my shin or my instep against the thigh. When we're doing this technique, I almost want to feel a connection with the ground. So as I land that kick, I almost want to feel that connection with the floor to know that I've got that angle that's driving the leg into the ground, okay? So try and imagine that as you're dropping the kick, you want to feel that you're, compressing that whole limb down into the floor, okay? The next thing, just making sure that when you're practicing this, and it's good to have feedback from your partner, that they're hitting the same spot each time, okay? If you land that kick repeatedly in the same spot each time, it can be really effective and it can start to cause damage quite quickly. If you're hitting multiple areas, you're not going to have that same effect, okay? So think about landing the same point each time. Also think about the striking surface being that upper part of the shin, okay? You don't want to be landing the lower part of the shin, because as you're kicking, you're thinking, as we said, about that connection with the thigh and pushing the whole limb down into the floor. You're doing that almost like driving your own thigh. So here's the connection here. It's my thigh that's driving her thigh down. If I'm too far up here, there's too much of an angle, there's too much you bend at the knee, and I don't have that same connection. All right, so I'm trying to connect with the upper part of the thigh. And it may be easier to start off with just actually aiming the knee into their thigh, and then once you've got that angle down, then start to move back and aim more towards the top of the shin, okay? The last bit, what we don't want is to have a rotation and then a pushing down, okay? So we don't want it to be here and here. It's not like a yokogeri type motion, okay? And also not bringing it up and down, okay? Straight from the floor, straight into the thigh. Here, lift up, bend the knee, rotate and come down, okay? Let's do a few more times. Practice it again.